We were approached by Hospice Care of the West asking if we would consent to doing a video interview with my dad. My parents were both in the military. They were both very proud of their service. My dad said the most important thing in his life was his family. The video was just a real gift to our family.
We welcome you back as we continue on with our program for today. A very special guest joining us on the program today. Denise Carson is with us today. And if that name rings a bell, you may have seen her column in the Register, Parting Ways, and we welcome you to the show. Good to have you with us, Denise.
Thank you, Rob.
You've also written a book about that as well. You've authored that book called Parting Ways, New Rituals and Celebrations of Life's Passing.
That's right.
Inevitability for all of us. Organizations like Hospice Care, of course, work on that on a regular daily basis. But for those of us with families, we all cope and deal with it. So how did you get interested in this particular area, this interest in the study and the talking about end-of-life issues, and how did you come about to write this column for the Register?
Sure. The column is really an extension of my book, Parting Ways, which is really a collection of stories about how families and communities are reinventing their role in end of life to bring about intimacy, dignity, celebration, and preparation to really a stage of life that's been alienated for over a century now.
Right. I understand part of what motivated this was personal experiences in your life.
Absolutely. My journey into end of life really started in the 1980s with my father's passing. It was veiled in denial by the doctors. He had cancer. He died alone in the hospital. And some 14 years later, my mom was diagnosed. And it was just, we took an opposite approach. The doctors at that time were open. My mother had a clear-eyed walk into end of life. In the last days of her life, I interviewed her, recorded the stories of her life. So she knew something of who she was going to live on in me, in my mind,
right,
after she passed away.
Your column appears about once a month in the Register, and but you also are working with Hospice Care of the West, working in some of their programs as well. But let's talk a bit more about the book. You probably draw from not only your personal experiences, but others you've had a chance to interview in putting this book together.
Absolutely. I traveled from the East to West Coast to interview families and individuals in hospice who had found innovative ways to bring families together at a time when they're feeling really wrenched apart. And they did this by having living funerals, which is a funeral before someone goes, so they pay tribute to your life before you go.
Right.
And there's a toast there and a roast happening. It's
both,
it's bittersweet, but it's amazing how someone at the end of their life can learn how they touched the lives of others.
Interesting. Did you notice any cultural differences between East Coast, West Coast, North and South? Were the differences in the kind of medical care that people have? Was it a religious differences? What are some of the differences you found as you traveled around the country?
Sure. I think what I'd like to point out is the commonality, and that was that if they had hospice, they were able to have that sort of last wish to take their final days at home and celebrate their life, whether it be at Hospice Care of the West, they do a life review where they interview the family and the person that's passing on so they can share their stories and the lessons they've learned and the wisdom that they've learned. And it's really a gift that not only to the patient, but also to the family. Yeah.
So really this type of a program and this type of care crosses ethnic boundaries, religious boundaries, cultural parts of the country. It can be effectively applied everywhere.
You know it, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things you've done, and of course there's a program going on, as you may know, here in the village, honoring veterans, interviewing them on videotape for the Library of Congress. That's one of the areas you focused on as well, some of the interesting stories. The one I read in December was a lady who was actually a pilot during World War II, and her story was interesting indeed. But they're all interesting stories. With so much to choose from, obviously, with only writing one column a month, you must have to really work hard at picking the best one for that month.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think some of this past column I just wrote, it came out on the 17th, and I was looking at how all the different people that I met over the past year, and how they're really giving us a model of how to approach these last days, whether it be, Bessie Anderson, who was 105 and in the last days of her life went up in a hot air balloon, or DJ Valentine, who he was just gone into hospice, and he celebrated his life with 200 of his closest friends and family. I mean, these are the exception, but they're helping to change the conversation about hospice from dying to living and celebrating life to the very last moment.
You mentioned the experience that you had with your father's passing a few years ago and the medical community. Are we seeing a change in the way doctors approach this subject? I mean, obviously, in some cases, they want to fight till the very end to keep that person alive.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And some people may choose that as well.
Sure. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think the doctors now are realizing that if they offer the information to let families know that the end might be near, that there might be 6 months or less to live when they go into hospice, or, the family can choose. In my dad's case, the doctors were choosing. They were the ones that were saying, no, he's okay, he's going to make it, he's going to make it. And he kept fighting until the very last breath.
Yeah.
But if you get the chance, for example, with my mom, they told her early on that, time was short. And so we used that time and really made it a meaningful journey.
They say that knowledge is power, so basically what you're saying is we really should get our doctors to be truthful with us.
And they are now. I mean, my mother's doctors were. It just, we've come out of that veil of denial.
Yeah.
We truly have. Well, we still have work to do, of course, but I think, the palliative care movement that's happening in the medical community is really serving as a bridge to hospice.
We're seeing so much specialization in medical care these days.
We sure are.
I would imagine we've got probably now specialists who deal with end-of-life issues. Palliative care, hospice care, is there now specialty?
It is. There is a specialty of palliative care, and they discovered in the late 1990s that that hospice wasn't getting enough recognition in the medical community. There wasn't that transfer into hospice, so they needed to build, as I mentioned, the bridge, and palliative care became that. And so now medical students can study palliative care in medical school. This is new, and it's fantastic because it's starting right where it needs to.
Interesting indeed. Well, that's a good thing, I think. Talk about your work with Hospice Care of the West, how you got coordinated with them, and some of the collaboration you've been doing with and for them.
Sure. When I was writing the book, I researched, as I mentioned, hospices across the country, and I was really looking for a hospice that brought life review into their care, because I found that everyone that goes through end of life has this life review where they feel like a movie screen is playing in the back of their mind, right? Reflections from their past. And these are defining moments, or maybe even moments of regret, moments of glory. But ultimately, they garner the wisdom that that person wants to pass on. And I found that right here in Orange County, Hospice Care of the West was doing this. And so I followed Donna Miller. She's the Director of Volunteer Services at Hospice Care of the West. And she invited me to sit bedside with her for 2 years.
Wow.
I followed her bedside to bedside and interviewing patients in the last days of their lives. These were raw conversations, but amazing moments that were shared between the hospice patient and
Yeah.
the family.
You know, obviously, we're not all the Waltons, and there obviously, in
Certainly.
some families, there are issues. This may be a time to heal some of those wounds, to
Absolutely.
ask for forgiveness on both sides, and to have the passing be a time of growth and of coming together again.
Healing. Yeah, there is, it absolutely, I find that in these life reviews, Donna has this icebreaker. She has the family come and give a hug and a kiss, and sometimes they haven't done that, you know, since they were children.
Right, right.
But it warms the room instantly, and it brings about reconciliation for some folks, and also for those, maybe it brings out memories of those that they want to see before they go. And Hospice Care of the West also has Dream Catchers, which is a group of high school volunteers who make last wishes come true. And some of those last wishes might be, I want to see my sister one last time
Right,
before
right.
I go, you know. And they provide
That's great. That's great.
this way of
Sort of like
reuniting.
Make-A-Wish, but it's for
For-
primarily older folks in the last
Yeah.
few days of life.
Like hospice.
In addition to the newspaper column and the book and your work with Hospice Care of the West, like everybody else, you're also on the internet as well.
That's right.
Celebration.tolife.com, I believe it's called.
Yeah, so when the book was finished, I wrote about life review and Hospice Care of the West in chapter 6 of my book, but then I wanted to continue sharing these stories. So we brought to the community celebrationtolife.com. It's a blog, fantastic resource for people who are approaching end of life, thinking about how they prepare themselves and their families. And the kinds of stories that I share are those that you see in my column, but also that Hospice Care of the West is doing every day, whether it be life reviews or the vigil volunteers who go and sit vigil with someone at the end of their life because maybe their children are on the East Coast and they don't have anyone to sit with them, you know, until the last breath. No one wants to take that
Amazing.
journey alone.
Amazing.
You know, and
work,
so they do that, and I'm able to write about these wonderful stories.
Great.
Because Hospice Care of the West really exemplifies the kind of hospice that brings about everything that I write about in the book and the column. And I suppose my hope is that one day all these stories that we tell on the blog and the book and the column will be the norm rather than the exception.
Great. We wish you good success. Denise, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you sharing with us today. Again, if you want to find out more, there's a number on your screen. You can give them a call and get more information about Hospice Care of the West. And again, you can check out that column on a monthly basis in the Register and also get yourself a copy of the book, Parting Ways, New Rituals and Celebrations of Life's Passing by Denise Carson. We'll be coming back with more right after this brief timeout.
It was the most wonderful, sweetest 2 hours sitting in the sun, letting Mom tell stories. She was a pilot during World War II with the Women's Air Force Service pilots. Hospice Care of the West really helped us find a way to find joy in all of this. And that video, it's a gift that we've not just given her, it's a gift we've given ourselves.